Met. I'm the president for the Rotary Club of Harrisburg, and I invite you to join us for a traditional luncheon meeting, service on a Monday, or Rotary alternate meeting. Everyone's invited, and that means you. Check out our website or Facebook page for more information.
Good. Then we get to move on with the much anticipated presentation today. John Hickey is going to introduce Jordan to us remotely. He couldn't be here today, but because we have such a phenomenal tech team, John, if you look, is here to explain to you, and no one is more fitting than John to explain to you why we have such a fantastic speaker today. John?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Ellen, can you give me a thumbs up? Okay. Hey, I'm sorry I couldn't be with you guys today. I really am committed to the work VOPA is doing, and I'm proud to see that Jordan's able to make it today. You know, I will say I'm almost glad to not be there, to be stuck in between Matt and Jordan. It's sort of like these two young studs, and in between, we're going to have a brief break of an old guy. In any case,
did you hear that, John? They said they agreed. So.
Yeah, I know both of them well. I was blessed to get both of their resumes over the last several years, and both have been a blessing, right? I really wanted to talk about that. When we talk about Jordan, you can read the record that we published in the materials for today, and it just tells you that the guy was an outstanding Marine, or is an outstanding Marine. But we didn't just go to the Marine Recruiting Depot and say, give us a poster boy and send him over to be to help us with VOPA. Really what happened, he's excelled at every level. He's excelled as an enlisted person. He's excelled as a student and then as an officer in the Marine Corps. And like I said, his record of accomplishment speaks for itself. I wanted to talk a little bit more about how Jordan came to work for VOPA and why I think that's such a special thing for us and for Central Pennsylvania. Jordan will tell you a little bit about himself. He is a Central Pennsylvania guy as well. But one of my colleagues a little while ago sent me a resume and said, hey, I've got a friend, a colleague who's getting out of the Marine Corps and wants to find something to do in Central Pennsylvania. Can you, and another colleague of ours, an Army guy who works for UPMC, can you guys meet with him and talk to him about what he might do in Central Pennsylvania? And he ended that email with a quote that said, Jordan Ames is without a doubt one of the finest Marines I've ever worked with, but he's an even better person. And so I think that that is the most telling thing I can tell you, because this guy was Jordan's boss. He was not, he didn't work for Jordan. It was the other way around. And this guy, he affected that person's life in a way that made him say that about Jordan. So the other thing I'll tell you, I don't know, Jordan, nod yes or no. Are you going to talk about your family at all? Or are you going to stick to all VOPA? Okay, he's going to tell you a little bit about his family. But when you meet a guy and he tells you that he has 7 children and that 6 of them he adopted under various circumstances. And then the last one is a miracle baby that really grew out of the fact that his wife donated part of her liver. When you hear that story, you're like, and by the way, I've just joined VOPA at Ellen's request as a board member around the same time. And I felt like Providence had put the two of us together, because Jordan is a person who cares about other people. He has a servant's heart. And it's exactly what we needed at VOPA. And I'm really glad to have him here today to tell you a little bit more about our program.
All right, well, thank you, John, for that introduction. I'll give the slides a second to come up. Really, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. Have a very brief slide on what veterans face, and then where VOPA ties into that. John briefly mentioned about my family. I think it's important to talk about my family because my desire to help others is only because I received that help when I was growing up, because I have a strong support group. There's the first slide. If you do not get my contact information, I do have business cards, so please reach out afterwards. So first slide, like John said, I'm from Central Pennsylvania. I was raised in the Paxtang area, just outside of city line, went through the Central Dauphin School District, graduated from CD East High School in 2001. I was blessed to be raised in a Christian home with loving parents, taught me the value of hard work. And again, if it wasn't for that upbringing, who knows where I would be, what situations I would be facing. I still have a strong supported family on my side, as well as my family's side. And I won't ever forget that. And I look at what VOPA is doing, and they're reaching out to people, veterans, that their support group either didn't really exist or it fell through on them. So I graduated from Central Dauphin East High School 2001. As you see there, about 2.5 weeks later, I was standing on the yellow footprints Parris Island, South Carolina. It was a dream of mine to become a Marine. I had thought about it since like grade school. So about a year before I graduated, I signed up, I enlisted, but I was also applying for an ROTC scholarship. I didn't get it. My grades were decent. Thankfully, it kind of gave me the trajectory that I had. I looked back, there's other options. If I would have known what I'd known, I probably would have went to hack, tried to do really, yeah, throw that little plug in there, try to do really well there and then go get a scholarship and move on. So I'm thankful for the route I had, and I wouldn't trade anything for the world. So the next slide, my enlisted time as a Marine. I was given the opportunity to be a security guard at a presidential retreat, Camp David. Most of you probably know where that is. It's a place the president goes on the weekends to get away, but also to do official business. While I was there from September of 2002 to September of 2003, President Bush's first term, he was up there like all the time, probably averaged every other week. And while I was there, of course, you know, we were getting into the war in Afghanistan. The decision was made, the War Council met in early March at Camp David. And of course, you know, we invaded Iraq in March of 2003. I knew my time at Camp David was limited. The trajectory of guys serving there was to then go to the infantry. I personally had a little more ambition. I wanted to challenge myself more. So I knew the Marine Corps had what's called reconnaissance and force reconnaissance units. It's kind of like the elite special operations of the Marine Corps, similar to Army Green Beret, Rangers, Navy SEALs, that sort of thing. So I had an opportunity to take the screening test for force reconnaissance in Camp Lejeune. I passed. I told myself, if I make it through this training, I had about a year left. I told myself, if I make it through this training, I'm going to re-enlist, but I just get a full experience on what that community is like. So I made it through the training in the summer of 2004. Had a couple other schools to go through, but I made it through I guess the meat and potatoes of becoming a force reconnaissance Marine. And then I was on a track to go on my first deployment, which was to Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2005. And that picture there, I think is a laser pointer. There you go. That picture, that's me. This is my team from 2nd Force Recon Company. And this picture, the gentleman to my right is our team leader. His name is John Gifford. I point him out because you may see my resume, and I did a lot of great things and, you know, a lot of accomplishments. I don't consider myself a war hero. I conducted combat operations. Never did I do anything so valorous to deserve any sort of medals of valor. That gentleman I just highlighted, he went on after that deployment. He was decorated for valor on that deployment on a specific mission, reconnaissance and ambush mission we were on. But he went on to train the next generation of Marine special operators. I did a deployment in 2007, and then I went on to a commissioning program. But when he went back to what then became MARSOC and kind of reorganized into smaller teams, he did a deployment to Afghanistan, leading a team, and then did a second deployment to Afghanistan, July 29th of 2012. It was his last mission in Afghanistan. He was killed in action, left behind a wife and 5 young boys. The oldest at the time was 8. He was awarded the Navy Cross posthumously for that action, which, if you know anything about Valor Medals, it's the Valor Award right below the Medal of Honor. There's a building named after him on the MARSOC compound. He's more or less a legend in the Marine Corps, really, and in MARSOC specifically. He's buried at Arlington Cemetery. I had the privilege to attend his funeral in August of 2012. He's the only Marine in the history of the Marine Corps to have a street named after him in Arlington. There's other streets named after Eisenhower, Kennedy, things of that nature, but there's now Gifford Drive. So I went to Penn State, and that's where I met the gentleman who John had talked about, who connected me with John. I served under him at Penn State as a Marine option, getting my degree, then going back into the service as a commissioned officer. To go into MARSOC, you can't go in as a second lieutenant. So I knew I had to do a different job before I could come back to the special operations community. So I desired to be an infantry officer. I spent time at 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and we did 2 deployments into the Europe area of operations. Thankfully, it was right after Benghazi. So the Marine Corps' response to Benghazi kind of created this deployment option to send Marine infantry over to Europe so we could be positioned to respond to problem areas. You'll see on the next slide, as I talk a little bit about my family, one of my older sons, he's in the Marine Corps. He went into the embassy guard unit, and he did a year-long embassy tour in Burkina Faso, and now he's part of security augmentation unit at Quantico, and they were designed after Benghazi to deploy to problem areas. And like I did, he recently met the president in Poland just a few weeks ago, because they used that unit to increase security for VIP visits. So I did 2 deployments to Europe. I had a lot of great experience, great opportunities, but I knew I wanted to get back over to the special operations community. So I went through their training, had to more or less start from scratch with that, go through their selection process, go through their 9-month school. And then as a captain, I was given the command of a Marine Special Operations team. And those are the 2 pictures that I share with you. There's a picture of our military freefall training that we did in North Carolina. And then about 2 months later, we had some rock climbing training. We did all those guys deployed with me to Jordan in 2018. Great deployment. We worked with a Jordanian special operations force that were responsible for the counterterrorism fight really within Jordan. And they were kind of the premier counterterrorism unit in the region of the Middle East. And a lot of other countries would come to them to use their facility and get training from them. So it wasn't necessarily a pretty or a sexy, so to speak, mission, but certainly necessary. And where it really developed me was how to see what was going on, like in the national capital region, making decisions regarding military power overseas, and how I needed to understand what they wanted to do in Jordan and in that region, and where my team played that role, because we were the only U.S. Special Operations Force in Jordan at the time. And then my favorite slide is my family. I put on there, I talked a lot about myself, a lot of titles on the previous slides, but my favorite title is father. And I say that because you'll see on the next slide, I believe it's most important for VOPA's culture to really, we want to help them reconnect with the pride they felt as a veteran, but they can't just lean on that. They need to move forward. If I just was like, oh, but I was this special operator guy, look at me, I did all these great things in the military, really my children don't care. They only care what love am I showing them? How am I developing them? I need to see what truly is my identity moving forward. The special operations community, they don't need me. They're moving forward, right? The government doesn't need me. They're moving forward. My family needs me. The veterans that will go through our doors, they're going to need each other. And we want to build that community around each other's support. And then we want to stay connected with that and help them to find a new purpose. Look at how you can give. So the picture on the far left there, that was about a month after we adopted our first children, a sibling group of 4 there from Pennsylvania foster care system. That was also my day of commissioning as a second lieutenant up at Penn State. And the picture on the right was at the courthouse about 2 months after we brought home my oldest 2 boys. That's Sam on the left there and Benjamin, who's now the Marine, on the right. Sam is a soccer player up at Bloomsburg, doing phenomenal. He had the most goals scored last season, helped lead them to the PSAC championship. They ended up losing 1-0, but great season nonetheless. And that was 2 months after we brought them home from Ethiopia. And that was at the courthouse finalizing the adoption. Of course, you see my wife, Sarah, in all of them. She is the glue, the rock that holds our family together. As much as I was gone, she kept everything steady, and I'm a lucky man, is a tremendous woman. The picture on the right, or I'm sorry, in the center, that was just taken, that was about 1.5 years ago up in Bloomsburg, right before my son Benjamin went over to Africa for a year. You notice my youngest son there, and in there, he's not in this picture, but then we also have a little, like John said, little miracle baby. So my youngest son, Joseph, he lives down in North Carolina. This is kind of my experience in the mental health side of things. We had to send him away to inpatient rehab in June 2018. I was weeks away from deploying to Jordan at the time. We had a lot of issues with him, trying to develop him, had him in some therapy. Well, he had a situation where he kind of broke and entered into a neighbor's house. And our therapist said, hey, if you don't put him in inpatient rehab, we're not seeing him anymore. As a proud dad, I didn't want to do that. I wanted, I can fix this, But now at the time, our littlest one was 1.5 years. I was deploying for 6 months. We met with a facility that said we have like an 85% success rate. 3 to 6 months, he'll be back home. So I was like, okay, we'll do this. He'll be back home before I will. Well, he just didn't really respond to the therapy. Kind of bounced around, was discharged. Some places were worse. Some places really helped him out. But at age 16.5, we moved up here. We were wanting him to finish out where he was and then bring him up here. He didn't want to come up here. And of course, we can't force that relationship. So we let him stay down in North Carolina. He's not doing too well. He definitely needs to find his own way, so to speak. We keep praying for him. We stay in contact with him as much as we can. But that's why you don't see him in that middle picture. And like John said, my wife, we donated blood, and she was contacted as like a donor match to be a living organ donor. I never knew that the liver can regenerate. Whenever she was like, yeah, for liver, I'm like, well, you only have one of those. So what? So they ended up cutting I think it was about 1/4 or 1/3 of her liver, and gave it to a 11-month-old baby, which we didn't know, but it was pretty cool because they ended up living about a half hour from us. So my wife and her and the baby's mom were able to have a friendship there. They still keep in touch. The baby, I think, is going to be about 8 years old this year, I want to say. So what we learned a year later after she had the surgery on a Friday. I was away at the Marstock selection, and we had, I was like, hey, if you're going through with this, because I had left 3 months or 3 weeks before that and knew that I wasn't gonna have any communication with her. So if you go forward through this, here's who to call. They can let me know, whatever. But she had the surgery on a Friday. I didn't find out till Monday because she didn't want them to tell me and have it kind of distract my focus. So it kind of tells you what kind of woman she is. And it tells you what kind of support group we have. One of her best friends came down to help her take care of her in the hospital. And her mom came down to take care of our kids while I was gone. And like I said, I learned of all that 3 days after it was already in place. And so when the liver regenerates, I guess it releases a bunch of enzymes that kind of reset your body system. Of course, we didn't know this. Sarah starts ovulating, and a year later, she's pregnant. That's enough about me. Just a quick roll up. And this is, I didn't do like any research. This is just from my standpoint, what I've seen. That picture on the right is taken off the US SOCOM. It's called POTF, Preservation of the Force and Family. It's basically their arm of SOCOM to take care of people. Obviously, not just the military, soldiers and sailors and airmen and whatnot, the families, but also the civilian workers. And that's really what we want to look at with VOPA, is just the whole person, the spiritual aspects, their social and family domain, physical, psychological, cognitive. If any one of those is weak and there's something wrong there, it's going to affect the rest of them. So VOPA's program is going to give them the house, give them the food and water so that they're not spending time worrying about that, searching for that. And we want to really focus on what's causing their homelessness. Some of the things that kind of popped into my head about what veterans face, reintegrating, whether it's coming home from a deployment, even with a strong support group. I'm gone for 6 months. The kids change. Sarah has to do things at the house that maybe I wouldn't have wanted her to do, or maybe I would have done it differently. For me to come home and be like, no, we should do it this way, it's not going to help the situation. And like I said, thankfully, we have a strong support group and we're able to work through things. Some people that ends in situations like divorce or, financial hardships. PTSD that's just a common one that you hear. That could be from a combat experience. There's a lot of women that if they're sexually abused, they go through the sexual trauma there. So that's certainly a big issue. And I know it also can happen with men. Of course, when you think of that, you tend to think of women, but it also happens to men as well. I have 2 examples there with PTSD, how to treat it and how not to treat it. Jason Glue was one of my first sergeants when I was a lieutenant, phenomenal enlisted Marine. He retired a few years before I did. He was in a lot of heavy combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was in the initial push into Marja, Afghanistan. I think it was 2010. He was a gunnery sergeant at the time. One of the Marine combat engineers in his Humvee had to get out to do some sort of breaching or mechanical removal of an obstacle. And bullets are flying, and Jason's like, hey, you need to get out here and do this. You need to take care of this so we can push through. That Marine didn't even get the whole way out of the Humvee before he was shot in the head and killed. And Jason Glue's arm was still on his vest. So that caused a lot of PTSD in Jason, but he worked through it. Granted, he was a seasoned combat veteran. He had experienced a lot of bad stuff before, but he knew what he was feeling and he worked through it. The sad thing today is with gentleman William Wold, who I served with at Camp David. He was in the Battle of Fallujah in November 2004. Very, very bloody battle for the Marines. I think in our history, it's bloodiest since Way City in Vietnam. Like I said, he was served at Camp David, so he went through a lot of screening to be able to have one of the highest clearances in the military to carry a fully loaded weapon in the vicinity of the president. Went through all that screening, did his job well there, left, went over to Iraq, saw a lot of stuff, did a lot of stuff. I didn't have any, I wasn't so close to him to keep in communication. I just kind of heard what happened. I think it was about 2 years after that battle, he took his own life, just because of from the demons he was dealing with. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we know we're going to be bringing in on the streets. It could be as terrible as some guys facing heavy combat, PTSD, could be other post-traumatic stress issues. And the bottom line there is, regardless of the situation, we need to help mentor and coach the veteran to kind of take ownership of their future. Okay, it doesn't really matter what happened in the past. We need to have them move on into the future. Because if they just say, well, it was because of this, it's their fault, it's that person's fault, it's this system's fault, it's that, it's not helping the situation. I just really quick want to tell you, I know a lot of you have heard about the organization. Tom Zimmerman, a co-founder here, of course, in the audience. One of the things that he was looking at when him and his wife and the other co-founder, Val Fletcher, thought about whenever they were deciding this tiny home communities, they thought about, oh, we'll put it out in the country, and we'll have trees and nice gardens. It'll be just nice, serene area. And whenever they reached out to other organizations that have done a model like this, they told me it was going to fail. They say you need to go to where the veterans are so they have resources and access to the things that can help them out. And so we found that. Was that you? Oh. But we found that south of the PennDOT building, and I'll show you a picture of that on the next slide. But I just really want to highlight what's underlined. The why in our mission statement is where our focus is: to promote and empower a life filled with strength and purpose. We're going to do that by combating their homelessness, by providing access to services. But that is our goal, to give them an empowered life filled with strength and purpose. So whenever they graduate our program, they're not only able to self-sustain, but they can be givers in society, producers. They can give back to VOPA. They can give to other veterans organizations. They can find a new purpose and help out and be producers in society. Another aspect that I believe is we're the first tiny home community to do this model is a therapeutic community model. We just hired a consultant to work with me in building our program. She's ran a therapeutic community before. She currently works for the Veteran Services Department of the YWCA. But that is going to be a focus. Like I said in the previous slide, the picture of the domain, addressing all those different issues. A therapeutic community is going to be able to do that just in your day-to-day activities. So here's the location. And I already mentioned how important that is. I didn't see Peggy here. No. But you all, I'm sure you all know, Peggy Grove is the one that donated us that land. And really, I'd say on the last slide, she's a cornerstone to our organization, because without that donation, you all know, I mean, how many 5 acres of land is there in the city of Harrisburg? If we're really looking to find somewhere in the city and not, build a nice serene camp somewhere else. So yeah, I hopped in and heard about all this and kind of fell in on the already success because of contributors like Peggy. So this is just the next two slides. I just want to hit a couple of the underline. The staff as community members. As the executive director, I know my role is to lead the organization, oversee, kind of do the fundraising, external stuff to what's going on in the community. But I also know there may be times where I need to involve myself in the actual community, because I just think about the leadership by example type of mantra. If I'm a veteran living in the community and all they see is me whenever they come in the first day and I say, here, this is what's expected, yada, yada, and I'm gone, like, what's that telling them? But if I'm going with them, if I'm helping them with the chores around, if I'm doing things with them as part of the community, they see the ownership I have in it. And I believe they're going to adopt that same ownership of the facility, of their peers. So I believe that's very important. And then peers as role models. You know, you have a guy that's getting ready to transition and somebody moving in. Well, that one moving in can just be enveloped into the culture that's already established based on the role models of the ones that are there. That bottom one, I just want to highlight I already mentioned, as they graduate from the program, that's not like, hey, good luck. No, we want to stay connected to them. We want to apply a mentor to each of our veteran participants with the idea that there's a relationship built there and that mentor can stay connected. And best case scenario, a graduate of the program returns and is one of our mentors. This is a quick overview of our community center. I know, is Beth Heifer here? I've yet to. Oh, hi, Beth. I was like, I didn't get a chance to meet her at our UPC event, but I know she's one of the big contributors for us, and she's on our advisory board. So thank you, Beth. She has made the donation to paint our community center. There's plenty of others. I'll just roll to the next slide. I already mentioned Peggy, Beth. There is, get my list out. Bill and Marion, I don't think they're here. Yeah. So they gave a significant donation. Not only that, is they got their church involved, and we're waiting on a decision from their church board, but their church might make a significant donation. Greg Sutliff is another who donated the money for a bench and a flag. I believe he's a Navy veteran. Is that right? So UPMC, we already mentioned UPMC, and I remember seeing Wendell here. Wendell's organization, Greater Harrisburg Association of Realtors. They made a significant donation, and they've stepped up and want to be more involved in how they can help us. So this Rotary Club, day one of my job back in July, I came here. I've been here one other time, and then of course this is my third time, and through our board and through other contacts in this club, we have gotten the most involvement from this club. So thank you. It's an honor for me to be in this position as the executive director of VOPA. And lastly, I just want to thank the veterans in the room. I met a few. I know Scott is. I met Vlad before, Brian Jones, sir. Was it Bob? All right. Any other veterans? Sir, thank you for your service. So thank you all for your support, Veterans Outreach.